Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going behind the curtain of big tech,
Hmm.
specifically Google, Facebook, now Meta, of course, and Amazon. You've provided a really fascinating stack of articles and book excerpts about their rise,
Yeah,
focusing on their impact on business, politics, and even our minds.
it's really kind of incredible, isn't it? I mean, when you think about
It
it,
is.
it's a story that goes way beyond just lines of code and Silicon Valley campuses, right?
Right.
It's about how these companies have completely reshaped the way we do business, how we engage in politics, and even how our brains function.
Yeah. No, it's not just about tech anymore, is it? One thing that struck me from the beginning of all this material was the almost mythic quality of those early days.
Oh,
You can practically feel that Wild West energy in Silicon Valley and even, across the pond in London's tech scene. It was happening everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. It was the dot-com boom, a gold rush for the digital age. And instead of picks and shovels, everyone was running around with ideas, algorithms,
Right.
and this unshakable belief that they could change the world from their garage. Remember that story about Ant Factory?
Oh, absolutely. And factory.
Yeah.
It just sounds like pure chaos, fueled by ambition and maybe a little too much pizza, right?
Yeah.
Move fast and break things.
Exactly. And, in that frenzy, very few people were actually pausing to consider the potential downsides,
Right.
which is fascinating, because even in those heady early days, if you really dig into some of the things that were being said, there were glimpses of awareness,
Yeah.
even from the companies themselves.
Yeah, you're right. It was like they knew they were playing with fire. I mean, Google's famous "Don't be evil" motto always seemed a bit ironic in hindsight.
It really does, doesn't it?
A little bit like, yeah,
I mean, it makes you wonder what was going through their minds at the time.
right.
And what's even more interesting is that some of those early Google memos that you shared, they actually acknowledge the inherent conflict at the heart of their ad-driven model.
Okay, so unpack this a little bit because I found this really fascinating.
Sure.
You're saying that even back then, they knew that what is best for the user, for us, and what's
Yeah,
best for their bottom line might not always be the same thing.
precisely. I mean, think about it. Their profits, they depend on keeping us engaged, keeping us clicking, and ultimately, being exposed to more and more ads.
Right.
So it's a built-in tension, and it raises some really important questions about who's really in control, who's really pulling the strings here.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get caught up in the convenience of free services, right?
Right, yeah.
But reading through all this, it really hit home that we are paying a hidden price, and that's our data.
And not just any data, right? But
Yeah.
arguably the most valuable resource of our time.
Yeah.
I mean, one article I was reading, it made this really striking comparison. They said, our personal data is the new oil,
Yes.
and these tech giants, they are the new oil barons.
I remember that. That is a really powerful analogy.
Yeah.
Because just like oil fueled the Industrial Revolution,
Right.
our data is fueling the digital revolution.
Yeah.
But who really owns that data?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? That's the crux of the whole issue.
It is.
These companies, they've built their empires by extracting and monetizing our data, often without us really understanding what we're giving away or even, giving our explicit consent.
Right.
One excerpt I think even mentioned, like a figure of $76 billion a year.
Wow.
$76 billion generated from our collective digital footprint, which is just, it's astounding.
That's a mind-boggling amount of money. You're saying that's what our data is worth to them.
It really highlights the incredible value of the information that we often just give away so freely. But it raises some serious ethical and economic questions, doesn't it? I mean, it's a new form of resource extraction, and it's happening on a scale that we've never seen before.
It's both impressive and a little terrifying, how much these companies have achieved in such a short time.
Mm.
But it's also become really clear, reading through these excerpts,
Yeah,
that this data gold rush has come at a cost.
absolutely. And it goes beyond just the economic value of our data, right? I mean, this is about control, influence, and
Okay.
the potential for manipulation here.
That's what really hit home for me in the section about the attention merchants.
Oh yeah,
It's almost like a digital arms race to capture and monetize our attention.
it's true. It's a fascinating and often, I think, overlooked aspect of this whole story. The research from Stanford's Persuasive Technology Lab really stood out to me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they literally study how to make technology more addictive.
Yeah, it's both brilliant and kind of terrifying, isn't it?
Totally.
That they figured out how to hijack our brain chemistry to keep us hooked.
Well, and they've gotten really good at it, right? The constant notifications,
Right.
the endless scrolling, these carefully designed reward systems. It's
Right.
all incredibly effective at, triggering those dopamine hits and
Uh-huh.
keeping us coming back for more.
And it's not even just our time and attention. They're after, right? I mean, it's our data, which then
Absolutely.
they can then use to further refine those persuasive techniques.
Of course, yeah.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. And it's not just happening on a personal level, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the excerpts also raise some major concerns about big tech's influence on a societal level,
Yeah, the stakes get even higher when we start talking about things like antitrust,
Yeah.
net neutrality,
Mm.
even democracy itself.
Exactly.
One of the most concerning examples for me was that Google Books case.
Oh, interesting, yeah.
Their ambition was staggering, right? I mean,
It's
scanning every book in the world, copyright laws be damned.
a classic example of what critics call Silicon Valley solutionism, right?
Yeah.
This idea that technology can solve any problem, even if it means bending or breaking the rules along the way.
And I don't doubt that they genuinely believed
Yeah,
that they were doing the right thing, that they were making knowledge accessible to everyone.
of course, yeah.
But it's also about control, isn't it? I mean, imagine the power of being
Oh,
the
absolutely.
gatekeepers to
Uh-huh.
all of that information.
Yeah, precisely. And that brings us to, I think, the whole debate around net neutrality,
Right.
which is really a debate about who controls access to the internet, which is arguably, it's
One of the most powerful tools we've ever created as a species.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it felt like everyone had an opinion on net neutrality a few years ago.
Hmm.
And for good reason, right? It's a very complex issue with huge implications.
Right.
On the surface, it seems simple enough, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't the internet be a level playing field where all data is treated equally?
Right.
But of course, it's not that simple, is it?
No, it's not. And it's not that simple because these companies are playing a long game.
They are.
They understand that controlling the infrastructure of the internet is just as important as controlling the content that flows through it.
Exactly. And that's where things like lobbying and regulatory capture come into play.
Right.
I mean, these companies have become incredibly adept at using their considerable resources to influence policy and shape regulations in their favor.
It's really worrying when, it's one thing for a company to be successful in the marketplace.
Sure.
But it's another thing entirely when they start using that success to kind of shape the rules of the game itself.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that brings us, I think, to one of the most concerning aspects of this whole story, which is this potential erosion of democracy.
Right.
The excerpts you shared about, Google's lobbying efforts, their attempts to influence elections, even, the allegations of censorship. It's a pretty disturbing picture when you start to put all the pieces together.
It's like we're trading our privacy and our autonomy for convenience and a few dopamine hits.
Yeah, it's the bargain, right?
And I think the really scary part is we're only just beginning to understand the full implications of this bargain.
Yeah. That's the thing about disruption, isn't it? I mean, it can be incredibly exciting
Right.
and full of potential, but it can also be incredibly destabilizing.
Right.
And I think it's really up to us, as citizens, as consumers, to
Right.
make sure that this digital revolution doesn't leave democracy in the dust.
It's a lot to process, isn't it?
It really is.
It feels like we've stumbled into a real-life sci-fi movie sometimes.
Yeah.
Except it's not robots taking over the world, it's algorithms.
And what's so unsettling is that these algorithms are often, they're opaque.
Right.
We don't really understand always how they work, how they're making decisions, how they're shaping our lives.
Right, and it's not just Google and Facebook, right?
Mhm.
This model, it seems to be spreading.
Oh, absolutely.
The excerpts about the gig economy, I thought those were really a wake-up call.
Yeah.
On the surface, companies like Uber and Deliveroo,
Right.
they seem like, convenient services, but
Sure.
the excerpts suggest there's a much bigger shift happening
Oh, yeah.
in the nature of work itself.
Absolutely. It's a new version of an old story.
Yeah.
Right? These platforms often operate in this regulatory gray area.
Right.
They're exploiting loopholes, they're pushing the boundaries of labor laws. And as traditional jobs disappear, We're all kind of left wondering what will the future of work even look like
Right.
in a world that's increasingly dominated by these digital platforms?
It's like we're trading security for convenience.
Yeah.
A steady job with benefits is replaced by the flexibility of gig work, but at what cost, ultimately?
It's the question that I think more and more people are really starting to grapple with.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the economics of it, right? It's about power. It's
Right.
about who has it, who controls it, who benefits
Right.
in this new digital landscape.
It feels like a pivotal moment, doesn't it?
It does.
Almost like we're at a crossroads.
Yeah.
We could either continue down this path we're on,
Right.
or we can choose a different direction.
Hmm.
One excerpt mentioned this idea of a digital New Deal.
Yeah. Interesting.
It sounds ambitious, but it also sounds necessary.
It does.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's a recognition that the rules of the game need to change,
Mhm.
right? The old models of regulation, of antitrust, even of democracy itself,
Right.
they're really struggling to keep up with the pace of technological change.
Yeah.
A digital New Deal would mean, I think, rethinking those rules from the ground up,
Right.
establishing new norms and standards for the digital age.
It's a huge undertaking.
It is.
But it's pretty clear that something needs to change.
Oh, absolutely.
We can't just sit back and let a handful of companies
Right.
dictate the terms of our digital future.
Yeah, we're all stakeholders in this, right?
Right, exactly. But where do we even begin?
Well, and that's the good news, right? It's not all doom and gloom,
Okay.
right? I mean, the excerpts also highlighted that there's a growing movement
Mhm.
of people who are really pushing back against big tech's dominance, right?
Yes.
Remember the time well spent movement?
Yes, advocating for a more humane
Exactly.
approach to technology.
Yeah, one that prioritizes, well-being over endless engagement.
Right, right.
And there are others, right? Organizations like the Center for Humane Technology, the Open Markets Institute,
Right.
even former tech insiders, right?
Right.
Who are now sounding the alarm.
Yeah, it's really, I think it's empowering to know that people are organizing,
Yeah.
that they're speaking out, that they're demanding better
Yeah.
from the companies that wield so much influence over our lives.
Mm-hmm.
What can we do?
Mm-hmm.
What can we do as individuals, to be a part of that change?
Well, I think it starts with awareness.
Yeah.
Right? It starts with educating ourselves about how these technologies work, how they impact us.
Mhm.
It means, being more mindful of our own digital habits, right?
Right.
Setting boundaries, questioning the trade-offs we're making
Yeah.
with our time, our attention, our data.
It's about reclaiming our agency, in a way.
It is.
Remembering that we're not just passive consumers,
Yeah.
but active participants in shaping this digital world.
We have more power than we think, right?
I hope so.
We do.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about.
Uh,
And more importantly, a lot to actually do.
and that's the point, isn't it?
It is.
It's not enough to just, to just understand the issues.
Right.
We need to translate that understanding into action.
Right.
The future of tech, the future of our digital lives, it depends on it.
Well said. It's been a fascinating deep dive.
It has.
Thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your insights.
It's been my pleasure, really.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey behind the curtain of big tech.
Yeah.
We hope this deep dive has inspired you to think critically, to ask those tough questions,
Mhm.
and to really join the conversation about how we shape a digital future that benefits everyone.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep exploring.